millions stolen out from under her by the House of Mouse. As the empire starts to crumble, the big question is, will Disney recover from this? For many, the answer is no. And here's the catch. While the fans are noticing the decline now, the staff noticed years ago, and even the CEO did. Bob Iger himself has publicly admitted he didn't want to come back. Think about it. He built the machine, but even he didn't want to fix it. He was dragged back like a failing manager asked to rescue a collapsing McDonald's. Except this McDonald's sells billion-dollar franchises. Now, what does this mean for those betting on Disney? In 2021, Disney stock was trading near $180. By late 2023, it hit $80. That's a 55% drop, wiping out billions in shareholder value. The board begged Iger to return. He agreed reluctantly, and only after his wife told him it was the right thing to do. That's not leadership. That's obligation. And when a company savior is acting out of guilt and not vision, you already know the ship is sinking. While Disney was trimming budgets and firing creative teams, Warner Bros. Was building. They poached talent. They restored Snyder's vision. Even if partially, they offered premium, adult-oriented DC films like Joker, The Batman, and Dune. And now they're reshaping the DCEU under James Gunn, who ironically got his big break at Disney. It's obvious the entire genre is shifting. People are tired of bad superhero films, of bloated CGI and joke-filled trauma. They're tired of corporate fan fiction pretending to be cinema. They want grit, stakes, a story, and Warner is giving them that. Disney made a critical mistake. They didn't just ignore their fan base, they mocked them. Time and time again, Marvel shows took aim at the very people who supported them for decades. Remember this? The She-Hulk finale ends with her arguing with floating AI. That literally mocks the MCU's formula. Before now, Marvel used to respect nerds, but things have changed. They now treat them like a punchline. It's like saying, we don't need you anymore, so those fans left. Just like the stars did. Now let's face it, is Marvel really dead? Well, in its current form, absolutely. Marvel as we previously knew it is all gone. And Disney has no one left to save it. Not RDJ, not Phage, not Bob Iger. Even Deadpool 3, which is supposed to be their comeback, is banking on nostalgia from 2005's X-Men and the last functioning remnants of the Fox franchise. So this is not a new beginning. It's the final hurrah. The truth is, Warner Brothers didn't need to destroy Marvel. They just had to wait. Wait for Disney to burn through its goodwill. Wait for the stars to get fed up. Wait for the audience to start booing instead of cheering. And it happened. Now, with meetings, strategic contracts, and actual respect for creative talent, they've pulled off the most elegant heist in modern film history. Right now, we're entering the post-Marvel era. Studios will no longer be able to pump out endless franchises and expect loyalty. Audiences are smarter, and they demand better. Even stars are beginning to know their worth. Overall, we can say that this isn't just the collapse of a franchise, it's the end of Disney's reign over the movie industry. And in its place, we're getting something new. What are your thoughts on these Warner Brothers deals with the Avengers? Let me know in the comments section. If you want more videos like this, go ahead and click the next part on your...
Bye, Disney. Disney, you history. Bye, Disney. Bye-bye, Disney.
There was a time when Hollywood exported American values. Now it exports American collapse. And the mask is off. This week, actor Pedro Pascal, the star of Disney's upcoming Fantastic Four reboot, decided to publicly attack J.K. Rowling, calling her a bully, simply for stating what every rational person knows, that womanhood is not a feeling, it is a biological fact. Pascal didn't just disagree, he smeared, vilified, and joined a chorus of elites who treat reality as hate speech. And what was Disney's response? Silence. Not because they were neutral, but because they agreed. Pascal still has a starring role. The message is clear. If you repeat the lie, you get the spotlight. If you speak the truth, even as gently and reasonably as Rowling did, you become the villain. This isn't about Pedro Pascal. It's about what he represents. A ruling class that uses culture as a weapon. Hollywood no longer tolerates disagreement. It punishes it. What began as a promise of diversity has become a demand for obedience. But this wasn't just an actor mouthing off on social media. This was a signal flare from the cultural regime, and what comes next is far more dangerous. Once upon a time, Hollywood was the factory floor of American imagination, a place where the stories we loved gave meaning to the values we shared. But that industry no longer exists. It's been replaced by something darker, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. A cultural enforcement mechanism for the most radical ideologies in modern political history. Entertainment has been hijacked not by artists, but by ideologues. And what used to be an engine of aspiration has turned into a hammer of accusation. Take Pedro Pascal, the star of Disney's upcoming Fantastic Four reboot. Rather than letting his work speak for itself, Pascal took it upon himself to declare J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series and a lifelong liberal, a bully for daring to defend biological women in the face of rising transgender activism. This wasn't a debate, it wasn't a difference of opinion. It was a public shaming ritual, a warning to anyone in the industry. Toe the line or be cast out. Speak the truth and you'll be punished. Repeat the lie and you'll be promoted. Let's be clear. Rowling did not call for violence. She didn't demonize anyone. She simply stated that a woman is an adult human female and that redefining gender to the point of absurdity erases the very people feminism once fought to protect. For that, Hollywood branded her a pariah. And Pedro Pascal, he was rewarded, not reprimanded, not distanced, not even mildly rebuked. He was cast in one of the most anticipated blockbuster franchises on the planet. Because in Hollywood today, woke aggression isn't a liability, it's a credential. This is where the entire narrative falls apart. We were told again and again that the entertainment industry cares about inclusion, about free expression, about telling stories that reflect society. But the truth is, they don't reflect America anymore. They regulate it. They don't follow culture. They try to manufacture it. And if you say something that contradicts the new orthodoxy, even a scientific fact, you're no longer welcome. And the irony, of course, is that J.K. Rowling is not a conservative. She's not a Republican. She's not some MAGA firebrand from a red state. She's a progressive, a feminist, a defender of traditional liberal causes. And even that is not enough anymore. If you step out of line on the wrong issue, your political resume becomes irrelevant. That's how far the open window has shifted. That's how powerful the fear of cancellation has become. Then came the most devastating part, silence. When Pascal called Rowling a bully, Hollywood didn't bat an eye. The media shrugged. Disney, despite claiming to value inclusivity and diverse perspectives, had no comment. Because silence is a strategy. They don't need to debate you. They don't need to defeat your ideas. They just want to make sure no one hears them in the first place. And the reason is simple. The people who run Hollywood don't want conversation.
Nope.
They want conformity.
Yep.
They don't want creativity.
Nope.
They want compliance.
Yep.
And above all, they don't want audiences deciding what's acceptable. They want corporate HR departments, Twitter mobs doing the quarter. But this was just the beginning. We're no longer talking about isolated cases of liberal bias. This is a coordinated cultural doctrine being enforced at every level of the industry. From casting and scripting to marketing and messaging, every layer of production is now filtered through the same ideological lens. You will believe that men can become women. You will believe that traditional families are outdated. You will believe that America is irredeemable. Whiteness is original sin, and dissent is violence. Or you will not look. This isn't storytelling, it's social engineering. And what's worse, it's being targeted directly at children. Disney, once synonymous with family-friendly content, is now infamous for embedding political messaging into children's programming. Animated films feature gender ideology, drag culture, and reimagined history. Network execs admit on camera that they push not-so-secret gay agendas and hire based on identity over merit. All while millions of parents across the country are begging, literally begging, for something their kids can watch without being indoctrinated. Then what happens when those families walk away? Hollywood doubles down. They don't care if you stop watching. They don't care if box office numbers collapse. Because the game isn't about profit anymore. It's about power. That's why platforms like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus are flooded with low-performing, high-budget content that no one asked for. That's why legacy studios are willing to lose money year after year if it means pushing the narrative one inch forward. This is where we are. An industry built on the First Amendment now enforces a speech code stricter than the federal government. Say the wrong thing, and you're gone. Don't say the right thing, and you're invisible. The actors, the writers, the directors, they all know the rules. The question is whether the audience will continue to play along. Because what happens when the people who shape culture decide that truth is hate? What happens when defending women becomes bullying, and objecting to propaganda becomes violence? What happens when entertainment stops asking what's true and starts deciding what's allowed? The answer is already here. Trust collapses, box office implodes, subscriptions fall, respect for the industry disintegrates, and an entire generation of Americans tunes out not just of the shows, but of the entire system that demands their silence. But they didn't stop there. What Pedro Pascal did wasn't just a casual insult. It was part of a deeper, more deliberate campaign, a cultural revolution happening in real time. And that revolution has a motive. Because when silencing one author becomes more important than entertaining millions of families, you're no longer watching a movie industry, you're witnessing a regime. And the reason they do it is simple. The real battle is never about robbing. It's about what they're planning to erase next. They're not filming tales anymore. They're staging a takeover. Hollywood no longer markets movies. It markets mindsets. It doesn't entertain, it indoctrinates. And right now, the entertainment elite isn't trying to reflect America. They're trying to replace it. What we saw in Pedro Pascal's attack on J.K. Rowling wasn't an overreaction. It was the broadcast-level enforcement of a corporate policy. If truth gets in the way of progressivism, truth must be crushed. The very engines of entertainment, DEI departments, gender theory consultants, anti-family think tanks, are now the front offices of radical activism. Diversity isn't viewed as representation, it's command. Gender isn't an identity, it's a doctrine. Family isn't a foundation, it's a threat. They don't quietly nod at social change, they demand it. And when pastoral values, faith, biology, marriage, stand in their way, those values go silent. They target traditional values in search of precision. Why? Because traditional values serve as the backbone of social cohesion. Social cohesion stands in the way of centralized cultural control. If you believe in common sense biology, you resist social rearrangement. If you believe in the sanctity of family, you resist worldviews built on fragmentation. If you believe your nation has a history worth preserving, you resist the dismantling of that history in the name of freedom. So transgender ideology became the front line. Not because transgender Americans aren't real or deserve respect, but because radical activism weaponized to erase biological truth. They redefined womanhood from the inside out, no longer a matter of chromosomes or experience, but of choice. And choice became doctrine. Speak honestly about biology, you're cancer. Deny that doctrine, watch your career evaporate. Pedro Pascal is no mistake. He's not a lone dissenter. He's the prototype. He's the proof. He's the man who said the quiet part out loud, biological truth is outdated, common sense is bigotry, and dissent will not be tolerated. He wasn't punished. He was promoted, started Disney's splashiest franchise, no qualifications needed except ideological obedience. J.K. Rowling didn't wake up one morning and attack a gender group. She simply reminded us that a woman is an adult human female. Even as a liberal icon, a feminist, she stood on principle. And because Hollywood cannot tolerate principle, they destroyed her reputation. That's not disagreement, that's ruthless ideological enforcement. This is not inclusion, this is a purge. When Hollywood demands you recite a cultural catechism to work, you aren't being welcomed, you're being vetted. The check isn't for talent, it's for compliance. Diversity initiatives, non-binary training, microaggression warnings, they are not about welcome mats. They are about guardrails. And cross them at your peril. And the reason they do it is simple. They want utter control, not just over what stories get told, but over what beliefs are permitted. They don't want you to ask questions. They want you to kneel. They don't want to broaden perspectives. They want to shrink them. They don't want debate. They want dictates. What scares them most isn't that people will disagree. They know people disagree. What terrifies them is that people will say so out loud and threaten their power. That is why compassion has become a cudgel instead of a quality. That is why empathy is weaponized against your own family, because ideology isn't convinced, it needs to impose. This theatrical overhaul is unrecognized as a threat because it's masked by glitz. They don't announce they're launching a culture coup. They tell you it's representation, but with purpose. They lure you with spectacles, celebrities, diversity talent hires. They pluck meaningful memes from social movements, embed them in scripts, then redub resemblance as relevance. Politics becomes entertainment. Entertainment becomes prescription. But this isn't just about the storylines. They're targeting your relationship with culture itself. When J.K. Rowling is silenced, when small studios are overshadowed by TDI-backed giants, when tickets decline but ideology holds firm, that isn't stagnation, it's stratagem. Hollywood is trying to corner how you think, what you see, and what you dare to say. This is surreal because Hollywood once sparked hope. It made people believe worlds were possible. Now it makes people believe they're not allowed to believe differently. It has traded imagination for ordnance, moral ordnance aimed at your thoughts, not your emotional truths. Those who run this machine believe they're reshaping not just an industry, but a generation. They see culture as their canvas, but they're painting in gray, draining light from color. Their script isn't asking for your support, it's demanding your silence. So as you scroll past the Disney Plus banner, as you see the same woke cliches repeating across streaming platforms, as you watch franchises that once inspired, now spew agendas, they are telling you something with every cameo, every building, every line. Obey the new moral code or be erased. But not everyone obeyed, and not everyone played along. Because while Hollywood was scripting surrender, someone else was preparing for a reckoning. Not with press releases, but with power. Not with slogans, but with action. Someone who didn't ask to be liked by the elites, only feared by them. And they were. Because he didn't want a seat at their table, he wanted to flip it over. There was a moment not long ago when Donald Trump didn't just criticize Hollywood from the outside, he took the fight inside its walls. He didn't issue polite statements or file lawsuits. He rewrote the rules of engagement entirely. Trump wasn't running to fit in. He was running to break down the ideological fortress surrounding America's entertainment engine. He started by cutting off the money pipeline. Radical arts programs and the National Endowment for the Arts were bolstered for decades to promote radical content, gender ideology, identity politics, and anti-family narratives. Trump didn't ask for moderation. He demanded accountability and slashed NEA funding targeted at compliance theater. Suddenly, tax dollars no longer subsidized propaganda disguised as entertainment. That was a declaration of independence for creators who believed in freedom rather than fear. But the change didn't stop with money. Trump elevated voices Hollywood refused to hear, non-postal, blue-collar, faith-driven, and often underrepresented. He stood with the small-town filmmakers, the independent creators, the podcasters who weren't shaping narratives in Burbank sound stages, but in real America. We saw voices rise that told stories of everyday heroes, not ideologues. And that shift in narrative influence
Now
loomed
you
larger
are
than any
prepared
scripted
against
blockbuster.
government
He
tyranny.
weaponized his own platform, Twitter, then Truth Social, to bypass the gatekeepers. No studio approval, no DEI committee sign-off. His speeches, rallies, and interviews became counter-programming for the cultural suffocation that Hollywood enforced. By speaking directly to the people, he destroyed their narrative monopoly and reminded America that culture belongs to the public, not the elites. And when drag shows and gender activism started trickling into elementary school curricula, content once considered niche, Trump didn't whisper in back rooms. He condemned it publicly. He identified it as invasive. He gave moral clarity that childhood innocence was sacred, that gender belongs with parents and pediatricians, not politicians and producers. He carved out public space for parents and creators to fight back. No longer would moms or dads be shouted down for asking hard questions about what their kids are watching. No longer would a writer be canceled simply for expressing personal convictions. Trump didn't just condemn the cultural cartel, he gave Americans the courage to say no. He didn't just fight in studios, he fought in homes. And the reason he did it is simple, because culture is not an afterthought, it is the architecture of society. The values represented on screen shape the values carried in hearts. And when Hollywood turned away from American tradition and toward activist orthodoxy, it wasn't just entertainment that lost meaning, it was the sense of common purpose itself. The cultural elite never saw it coming. They thought the money and influence they wielded were permanent. They believed technical talent could protect them from scrutiny. They assumed the public would stay quiet. Instead, they unleashed a wave of counterpressure that no seminar nor social media campaign could contain. Then came the most devastating part. Trump's movement reclaimed the narrative not just with words and votes, but with legislation, with funding decisions, with political momentum. Parents who once feared speaking up began filing school board complaints. Viewers who once canceled cable signed up for new platforms with conservative content. Creators who once stayed silent began telling stories that resonated with middle America. These were quiet revolutions, but wide ones. And as the public started demanding balance in children's media, parental approval ratings for traditional producers rose. The film Sound of Freedom, made outside the usual studio circuit, earned critical and commercial success. It wasn't trendy, it was true. It told a real story about child exploitation and moral courage, and Americans responded. These were the seeds of a cultural spring. Trump's message wasn't just opposition, it was permission. Permission to challenge, to question, to vote. The entertainment cartel thought it was invincible. They believed their promise of progressive content was irresistible, and that no amount of box office failure or parental outrage would matter. But the numbers and the public say otherwise. This isn't imagination or opinion, it's data, and it means the culture war is being won. Disney stocks are plummeted, not because of shifting markets, but because the Magic Kingdom no longer feels magical. The Marvels cratered at the box office. Lightyear underperformed, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny collapsed into a launch that should have been a hit. These aren't flukes, they're trends. Audiences are tuning out. They're tired of propaganda masquerading as entertainment. When families don't show up, neither do the profits. At the same time, conservative
Y'all trying to stop that the other movie,
family-focused
getting
studios
the trafficking. That's what y'all fucked up at, Disney. Y'all been having that motherfucking trafficking movie. But y'all ain't let the trafficking movie come out. The minute they use their own money, they put that trafficking movie out. Disney, that's why y'all fucking losing now. Disney, cause y'all fucked up. Disney.
They want heroes, not ideologues. Look deeper, and what emerges is even more striking. Latinos, black families, and suburban voters, once considered poor progressive demographics, are turning away from radical gender ideology. Poland shows significant majorities rejecting the push to indoctrinate children with unfamiliar gender themes. They want affirming content, not subverting it. And that rejection is influencing entertainment choices. Their parents and grandparents aren't buying the narrative, and they're voting with their dollars. Meanwhile, J.K. Rowling's books are still selling by the millions. Despite being canceled by the cultural elite, her Harry Potter series endures and continues to draw new generations. Why? Because truth resonates. When Hollywood tries to erase biological fact, people respond by reinforcing it through their choices. That's not nostalgia. That's a signal that authentic voices will outlive manufactured ones.
Yep.
Hollywood overplayed its hand. It ignored box office trends in pursuit of ideological purity and unleashed shockwave after shockwave of woke assaults. It didn't just alienate conservatives, it alienated centrists, independents, and many who had no dog in the culture war. Now studios are left holding red ink and empty seats. And what used to be about ratings and political buzz has become a question of survival. This isn't just entertainment, it's civilizational resilience. It's not about who wins awards. It's about whether we'll trust our storytellers again. Can we ride a spaceship on film without preaching identity politics? Can we watch a hero's journey without a sermon? Can we believe that culture still reflects us and not the other way around? The answer, we can see, is yes. People are turning to creators who respect parents, communities, and shared values. They're supporting a counter-industry of filmmakers, writers, and studios who still believe in narrative over narrative control. They're going to the theaters and logging into platforms that affirm family, tradition, and dignity. This shift matters deeply because when audiences start demanding alternative content, it becomes a political force. It triggers boardroom decisions, investor reckoning, and studio rebranding. It forces policy reevaluation and advertiser realignment. It invites creative insurgents into the studio system. And it reminds the gatekeepers that culture isn't theirs to own. It belongs to the people. If Hollywood had taken any one of those blockbuster flops, the Marvels, Lightyear, Indiana Jones, as a market correction, perhaps they'd course correct. But they doubled down. They blamed the audience. They called them hateful, bigoted, and ignorant. They blamed the patriarchy, the deplorables, the rural dudes, anything but their choices. It's resulted in a collapse, not of ideology, but of credibility. And yet, America hasn't collapsed along with Hollywood. In fact, a resurgence has begun. Small studios are thriving. Independent creators are riding the wave. Audiences are rediscovering joy, nuance, and wonder in stories that weren't written as manifestos. For the first time in years, the entertainment conversation isn't driven by the studios. It's driven by viewers, by parents, by everyday Americans who refuse to let art serve ideology masquerading as morality. This isn't a fringe movement. This is the majority asking for sanity, balance, and sense. They don't fear the collapse of Hollywood. They fear what replaces it, an America that remembers who it really is. And the momentum is only building. What we're seeing now is more than just consumer rejection. It's cultural realignment. Parents who once felt isolated for pushing back against radical content are realizing they're not alone. Educators, community leaders, and even quiet centrists are beginning to speak openly. They're not shouting into the void anymore. They're being heard. And more importantly, they're being vindicated by results. This rejection of woke entertainment isn't simply about stopping bad content. It's about reclaiming the right to define normal. For decades, Hollywood has subtly, and sometimes aggressively, redefined what families should tolerate, celebrate, and eventually participate in. They replaced inspiration with agitation. Instead of heroes we could cheer for, we were handed lectures. Instead of uplifting stories, we were fed narratives designed to fracture us by race, gender, and identity. But Americans aren't fractured. They're simply done playing along. And here's the final irony. Thus, the cultural elites who once believed they could dictate the moral compass of an entire nation are now facing their own irrelevance. Because the audience they scorned, mocked, dismissed, that audience is walking away, not with protest signs, but with silence and with their wallets. Hollywood thought they could reshape the American mind, but it's the American people who are reshaping Hollywood.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what we need to do. Reshape
We are
Hollywood.
in this. We are leaning on this